So why exactly are people not talking about video games anymore? It's not an isolated incident, okay? I've seen so many people come out and say that because Tears of the Kingdom isn't talked about, that it somehow is a failure in spite of quite handedly outselling titles like Elden Ring and Baldur's Gate 3, right? That has been the go-to excuse for Tears of the Kingdom not being successful. And we've seen this lobbied a handful of other games. Super Mario Bros. Wonder, I think, is the upcoming Nintendo title that's getting hit by this a lot. This phenomenon of people not talking about games. But I have to wonder, like, where are these people looking? Because I actually checked like the completionist channel, and he was doing like an entire preview, like Mario Wonder thing. Like Nintendo invited him to a closed door event, which, by the way, a couple of weeks ago, people were saying was actually for Switch 2. Like he played the game, he talked about it, he gave like a brief overview. People are hyped. So I really have to raise the question here is like, what exactly do you mean when you say a game is not talked about? Like, by the looks of it, what people are saying is that like people aren't obsessing over the game like they do with Undertale or FNAF or Fortnite or like any of these like meme games that have this like big stream culture surrounding them. But just people just buying and playing a video game is not enough in the eyes of the internet. You have to be like obsessed with it. And it has to be like the all you talk about. It has to be all you think about. It has to be all you do. Otherwise, the game is not successful and it's not relevant, right? That's why we're seeing this weird phenomenon where people are pretending as if Baldur's Gate 3 has a chance of winning Game of the Year 2023, when in reality it's too niche of a property that can't compete with the much more mainstream and much more successful and much better made Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, right? The differences in quality between the two products are astronomical. But like if you went by the discourse online, you would think that it was like Baldur's Gate 3 that was like much more popular and much more talked about. But in reality, if you take away the whole like online discussion thing, like suddenly Zelda is like coming out ahead in basically every metric, right? It has higher sales, it has higher player counts, it is on the more successful piece of hardware. Like, what exactly makes Baldur's Gate 3 better than Tears of the Kingdom? Not a single person can give any adequate explanation as to why that is, other than some like vague assertion that the game is more talked about. In reality, like what's happening, it feels like, is that people like me, people who love games, who love talking about games, who love like, discussing games and talking about their positive and negative aspects, we are not openly talking about games on social media anymore, right? I don't use NeoGAF, I don't use 4chan, I don't use Reddit. I don't even like watch other YouTube channels, right? The reason I don't do this is because all these outlets are controlled to some extent, right? NeoGAF will ban you for being too pro Nintendo. 4chan moderators will come after you for being a fanboy of Zelda, right? Reddit will come after you if you have like the wrong opinion about Fire Emblem Engage. Like on YouTube, I have like dozens of basement dwelling virgin autists like doing commentary videos on everything I do, trying to find something they can prove wrong, right? Like I have people trying to convince their audience that I didn't play Baldur's Gate 1 on stream because they didn't see it in the title. Like it's crazy. Even though that like I observably did do it, right? I talked about this at length. Like there's all this weird conspiracies that like I never give negative reviews to Nintendo content. Like the basically what happens, right? If you're in any way pro Nintendo, if you're in any way talking about how things are really how things really are, if you're red pilled on the subject, right? If you actively talk about how PC gaming is like a complete disaster and how emulation is illegal, if you openly talk about how Nintendo is better than the competition, they try by any means imaginable to come after you. And it is not just me. right? Like I cannot begin to tell you just how many other YouTubers are are getting harassed and attacked simply for saying that like they like Nintendo Switch, right? Like how often has Arlo been accused of being a Nintendo fanboy, even though he is overly critical of certain aspects of the company and like is in and of himself like kind of a pretendo, right? I'm very critical of Arlo for not being enough of a fan, of being like a complete casual who doesn't really like anything that takes any modicum of skill or like takes time to learn or whatever. Like I think Arlo is a pleb, but in the eyes of like the masses, the evil like Nintendo hating community, like he is like the stereotypical Nintendo fanboy when in reality he doesn't know anything about the company, right? Like everyone, if you're in any way positive towards Nintendo, if you like any one of their brands, if you're positively covering any aspect of their hardware or their titles or like the future of the company or the Mario movie, you're gonna see people come after you. And the Mario movie, I think, is a really interesting example of this because we saw this movie come out, be a huge success. It's like like the 15th or 16th like highest grossing film ever. The third highest grossing animated film of all time. A huge success by all metrics. But like all anybody could do was try to pretend it bombed and that like Nintendo failed and that like it's not the biggest movie of the year, trying to like find some reason not to positively talk about it, right? And it's getting more and more it's getting more and more unreasonable, I think, to deny that like Nintendo is a real phenomenon. When I see people try to say that like Super Mario Bros. Wonder is not a major release for Nintendo Switch, or that like Switch 2 is on the horizon, at this point I just burst out laughing, right? Tears of the Kingdom is not going to win Game of the Year. I just burst out laughing because these people just don't know what they're talking about. They are letting their biases against Nintendo dictate what they think should and should not happen, right? They genuinely believe that they can just will Nintendo into failure. They can just will Nintendo into bankruptcy. They can just will Nintendo to go third party and put all of their games on PC. Oh, wait, I forgot. All of the games are on PC already, apparently, even though you have to illegally download them to get them all, right? Like it's a joke, right? The Nintendo hate community is a joke. It is ingrained into gaming culture. It is like the most defining characteristic of gamers, I think, is that they have to religiously try and convince you that they're mature adults by hyping up other consoles, hyping up other games, hyping up other developers without any real respect or knowledge of what Nintendo is doing. It is crazy seeing people try to like bend over backwards, downplaying Metroid Dread, downplaying No More Heroes 3, downplaying Pikmin 4, Tears of the Kingdom, Cereza and the Lost Demon, Fire Emblem Engage. Like all of these great games that have come out in the recent past have, to some extent or another, been considered failures in the eyes of the gaming public. In reality, most of them are quite big success. I think all of them are quite big successes, right? Tears of the Kingdom is shaping up to be one of the most popular games ever made, right? And we're still like doing this thing where we're pretending as if it's not that big of a deal. Like, why? And like the answer is simple, that like you are not allowed to say anything positive about Nintendo on social media. And as a result of that, if Nintendo is the only company worth talking about, nobody's going to be talking about anything on social media. Like nobody wants to tweet about how they like Tears of the Kingdom and how it's a great game, and then be like dogpiled by like 20 like losers who have nothing better to do but like try to convince you that like Elden Ring is better or Baldur's Gate 3 has a higher Metacritic score. Like that's what happened. When Baldur's Gate 3 like came out of the gate with that like 97, people bombarded me with like claims that like Baldur's Gate 3 had a higher Metacritic score than Tears of the Kingdom. Like, and this was right out of the gate, right when the game was brand new. Instead of actually playing this alleged 97 Metacritic score game, like these guys saw fit. Like this was their priority, to come after someone irrelevant and try to convince him that like this was Tears of the Kingdom has been dethroned as the game of the year 2023. Like that was their mindset, is that they thought they could have one up on me. And of course, like it all collapsed, like it lost a Metacritic point, like it's tied now. It really should be a lot lower, but whatever. Like, and Baldur's Gate 3 is well on its way to becoming the next Dragon Age Inquisition, a game that was only promoted for woke values and will be forgotten once the hardcore gaming season is over. It will be forgotten by January next year, right? Honestly, I would argue it's been forgotten now, but whatever. Like, my point is, like, this happens to everyone. You cannot talk positively about Nintendo without being harassed. And it's not just like an online thing. I've talked before about how people used to disrespect me for being a fan of this kind of stuff. People used to come after me. People used to like make all these weird claims. People used to attack all my favorite things, like just because they thought it made them look cool. Right? And it was pathetic. I thought it was pathetic even then, but it gets more and more pathetic every year. But like the thing of it is, like I'm playing and enjoying my games, right? Like I'm loving every moment I spend like playing Mario Kart 8 Deluxe or Advance Wars or Super Mario Maker 2 or like, I'm awaiting the release of Detective Pikachu Returns right now, right? you know, I am enjoying what I'm doing right now, but like I'm not necessarily talking about it, like I'm not necessarily talking about like every little thing that I do. I've put like 30 hours into Pikmin 1 on Nintendo Switch, right? I've been cutting down my times. I've been like playing this game. It's like probably one of my favorite releases this year, even though this is an older game. Like this is a fantastic experience, one of the best gaming experiences I've had this year. And what happens? Like, I don't talk about it much because I'm too busy playing it. I don't want to deal with the online gaming community. I would rather just play my games. And that is the situation we're in right now, right? Is that like we have real gamers who are spending the vast majority of their free time playing games, playing games, discovering new ones, maybe doing a quick like review or an overview talking about it, and then they're done. They're moving on to the next great thing, right? But when it comes to the PC community, when it comes to like the social media empire and like the cliques and like the people pushing an agenda, the propagandists, like the game journals, the YouTubers, like all they can do is try and convince you that there's like something wrong with Nintendo Switch. Like, oh, it's going to be replaced by 2024, right? The Nintendo Switch Online can't go anywhere from here. Super Mario Wonder is not going to be a major release. Detective Pikachu Returns, what's that? There are no major releases for Nintendo Switch throughout all of 2024. I still remember when these people were trying to say that about 2023. And I think they were doing it in 2022, but like I think back then they were still like going with the Switch Pro thing, but like, and then they like transitioned like at some point, like by the end of the year to like talking about Switch 2 instead. But like anyway, like they will do anything but admit that the Nintendo Switch is a good console, that it is the market leader. And like, why would you ever discuss video games with people like that? Like more and more I find that the people in my comment section just ragging on me simply for liking Nintendo aren't even really worth paying attention to, right? They're not gamers. They're not people with like encyclopedic knowledge of like Nintendo and its history and all of its games. Like I'm at the point now where I feel like I know more about the vast majority of like their favorite games than they do themselves, right? So I know perfectly well that games like Gothic, games like Baldur's Gate, games like Fortnite, FNAF, Diablo 4, Street Fighter 6, Hi-Fi Rush, Forspoken, Final Fantasy 16, like every major release that came out this year that the industry told us was going to stop Nintendo, was going to make Switch irrelevant, which was going to like bring PlayStation and Xbox back to the forefront. Like all of these titles have just failed to leave a dent in the Nintendo Switch. And most people are still in denial about this. Most people are still trying to convince you that the Switch is about to be replaced because it can't compete with the Xbox and the PlayStation and the PC. But in reality, it's the other way around. Like, people just will not accept that the Switch is still dominating, that it's still the market leader, and they will fight to the death to keep the narrative going. They will do anything they possibly can to disparage Nintendo fans, to disrespect them, to come after them. And I have to ask you, why exactly should we ever care about what these people think of our favorite console?